still think that you're building it to come
Hey.
pick up.
Yeah, I still have them in the same room. I haven't moved it.
Okay, see, they're so connected, you all, that they're you know, they're chatting even before we introduce Lunch with Gina. Welcome to another segment of Lunch with Gina. As you know, with RISE, we're building bridges between families of color and the culture of independent schools. And, you know, this week we had the opportunity to share some dynamic things that have gone on since September. And this year is like a fast train. It's moving. But we've had some really great events. We talked about young women of strength recently, and I'm really proud today to have with us two folks from the independent school world who are very much leaders and in our equity and inclusion work. And they touch our children and us as parents every day, and their fellow administrators. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the event. Well, hi, John. Hi, Dwight.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
So thank you so much. Congratulations on a phenomenal event this past weekend. And I want to talk more about that, but I want to introduce it a little bit because I think that it was very much a revolutionary event in that you two managed to bring together in a collective space young men of color and young white men, both doing work around equity and inclusion, and in very diverse ways, in that there were a number of different schools that were there, from middle school, upper school, right? So you had that diversity in schools, the types of schools, geography. I met people from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. We had some people from Chicago.
Yes. It was also interesting to be on the flip side of what I think we experience in predominantly white institutions, is that it wasn't predominantly white in that room, but there was a white presence and a very necessary presence. So I just wanted each of you to introduce yourselves. And Dwight, I'm going to lead with you just because the Young Men of Color Symposium got its start maybe maybe a year or two.
A year before.
A year before.
Officially a year before, a little bit before that.
Finding power. And then, of course, John, please come in and introduce yourselves. But I wanted to find out from you, now, you know, I need these for distance, but I cannot read with these, so hold on. So I want each of you to talk about why it was important for you to develop the space, Dwight for young men of color, John for you for white young men and redefining power. Why was it necessary? Why was it important to create this space and to bring them together?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's right.
All right, I'll start off with the young men of color. Hi, everyone. My name is Dwight Vidal. I am an English teacher, 6th grade and 9th grade at Riverdale Country School, and I'm also the director of community engagement. So I'm a senior admin who oversees a team that looks at organizing and facilitating conversations around equity and inclusion here at Riverdale Country School. I am the founder of the Young Men of Color Symposium. We just celebrated our 5th year. Thank you. Actually, the conference, this is actually our 7th time doing it. We actually started back a little bit before, where it was a hilltop attempt. The first year that we did it, we had 12 students, 11 students. Yeah, 11 students from Riverdale, and then we had 1 student from Fieldston who also came with his father. And we had New York Times editors Charles Maybury and also Charles Blow. And we just spent the day just talking with each other, and it was an amazing space. The following year, we tried to do it again. Unfortunately, it was just a Riverdale event, and we didn't have a lot of people. And then the 3rd year, I didn't do anything with it. And then finally, I said, hey, you know what, this was really worthwhile and valuable. Let me do it again. So what I did was I reached out to other equity and diversity practitioners throughout New York City, just a blanket email like, hey, this is a big, hairy, audacious goal that I have. Who would like to help me? And I had about 5 people say that they wanted to support. And we got together, and the first conference that we did together as a team, we brought over 100 people, and it was like, whoa, this is amazing. You know, it was just fantastic. And since then, the conference has grown to now where we service close to or about 300 students, not including adults who also go through an adult track. And the reason that I decided to bring it together, first and foremost was that I am a product of the independent school. I wish there was a space like this for me while I was a student there, just so that I could connect with other young men of color and just share what the similarities and differences in our school community. And this year in particular, we decided to move away from just the celebratory nature of the event and really start to think a more critical lens about what it means to be a young man of color, thinking about our marginalized identities, but also being a little bit more critical of our privileges as well, especially around men, being men or young men, and some of the masculinity, toxic masculinity challenges that are there. So that's why I decided to bring it all together.
Yeah, you all went deep, very deep in, and I want to say that Chaz John, my son, who is in the 8th grade, I asked him today, I said, so, you know, if you could have 2 words or you could share 2 words that would describe your experience this past weekend, he said, exciting and revealing. So when you think about the banner for the conference, which was pushing
and expanding boundaries.
Pushing and expanding boundaries, and him saying that, you know, wow, you know, it was an exciting experience, but it revealed a lot. Talk to us a little bit more about how, I guess, even redefining power, that space that you brought in, John, which is a very interesting space, and it's like the reverse. So first of all, it's courageous,
yeah,
but it's necessary work. So talk about how you were pushing and expanding boundaries with the work from Redefining Power.
Yeah. So thanks, Gina, for having us. I'm John Gentili. I'm the co-director for the Office for Identity, Culture, and Institutional Equity at the Horace Mann School. I'm a senior administrator here at the school working on equity and inclusion efforts, nursery through 12th grade. And so, my phone's ringing. Hold on 1 second.
All right.
He's a busy man.
You see some leaves. Okay, the foliage. We got to see some foliage.
We got foliage. We got leaves. My apologies. Never a quiet moment. So I think what was important about creating Redefining Power, so Marima Richards and Dwight and I knew each other from different spaces and times. And Marima Richards had the idea of saying, like, white boys need to be having these conversations just as much, and they actually don't have the language and the practice and the muscle memory to really engage critically in these conversations. And so she's known me since I was this big. I was a student of hers at Georgetown Day High School in DC, and I was in New York doing equity work, and she said, you know, Dwight does young men of color. We'd be great to have a space for young white men to be doing this different work around similar identities in terms of race and gender identity. So what was really important about creating a space for young white men, especially in this context of like pushing and expanding boundaries, is that we're seeing, especially right now in the context of our country, white men holding on to the sort of historical framework of what it is to be a white man in this world. And that is to, in some ways, exercise violence at no cost to anybody else's life. I mean, at the cost of everybody else's life. And this idea of perfectionism, right? To be perfect, or to have the world always say yes, and when the world says no, to respond in ways that are sometimes deadly. And so for me, the stakes are pretty high. And so how do we have, especially as a product of independent schools and in spaces where that sort of this unwritten rule that white men are supposed to lead, but yet we don't talk about what it is to be a leader, or what tools you need to lead. And so for me, creating context for young white men to sit down and say, how do you actually process your feelings in a way that is constructive? How do you understand whiteness and manness and their sort of apex in conversations around power, and understanding, like, how do you then thus say, how do you build a new world with new building blocks? So how do you understand that, like, the world has been built for you? And so how do you then now build a new world where that's really exciting, that you can build a new world based on the foundation and language that other people have started to provide for you? And how do you navigate those conversations with clarity and with purpose? And I think for me, it's being able to say that the constrictions around the systems that maintain power do hurt those who are the beneficiaries of that power. So young white men, to maintain that power, have to fit a very specific framework. And if you step out of that, you are diminished, right? Or excommunicated in some ways. And so how do we then expand and push beyond that and say, it's hurting you in different ways, and then you exact hurt on other people when you feel like you don't have that power. And so for me, I think that's been a really important piece of this, is to negotiate those conversations so that they understand their role in this work and understand the benefits and the engagement with their humanity when they do this work.
Thank you. Yeah, that's where else besides independent schools do we have the time, the resources, the purpose to even have these conversations? This is very rich and deep, particularly at a very fundamental life stage for these young men, right? Middle school and high school before they're heading off to secondary school. So the idea of
quickly, Gina,
too, and not doing this work in silos, but in doing it together, right? With a common keynote speaker who you had that I heard was amazing. I don't want to mess up his name.
John Doe Chase Chen.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I said he was amazing, talking about identity, that big piece about what does that mean? What doesn't it mean? So to do that work was great. And so the numbers of young white men has increased over time as well, right, John?
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, it's always been an intimate space. And it's actually for us, I think we really want to go about the quality of the conversation, not necessarily about the quantity. I think for me, there's a intimacy that's important. Plus there is a original purpose of that space was young men of color. So like for me, it's sort of like the conversation we have about the People of Color Conference and like how many white folks should be showing up in those spaces. And I think for me, it's going to be really intentional that that it's not necessarily about the number of young white men in the space, but what is the quality of the conversation that we're creating for young white men in that space. And so, but yeah, so I think the number has been steadily increasing. And I think it's also important in the sense of like, maybe we have a different cutoff and maybe we have a different barrier in terms of the amount of people we want in that space, so that the space does not feel the shift. Yes.
Right. So, but there is something to be said, Dwight, about that space being predominantly people of color. It's wow. I personally felt, because I'm always working our parent spaces into these spaces, because it's really, we're all the same. We're all stakeholders in this bigger institution. But to see that much reflection of yourself is just like a bomb. It's just really quite fulfilling, you know? And you're not alone. You might be that one of a few in a class, but you're really not alone, right?
No.
So what would you say, I want to close with this, what would you say was one of the highlights, Dwight, that came out of that afternoon that kind of surprised you and made you say, wow?
First of all, thank you so much again, Gina, for even hosting us. This is phenomenal, just to have a chance to have a lunch.
We got to celebrate. We have
to I think, one of the things that's always surprising for me is the fact that the young men can see themselves reflected, as you were just saying, Gina, not only in their classmates and in their peers at other schools. The conference is open not only to independent school students, but those who attend parochial schools, those who attend public schools, charter schools. We really try to expand the reach so that different people are having this experience, because we know that being in an independent school, we do have the resources available to us, and trying to just be mindful of that equity piece and how we can share that and not invite people to
bubble,
like,
right? And come out of our bubble too.
Yeah, and it's not just about like inviting people to the table, right? But it's really reimagining what that table even looks like, and having everyone as stakeholders in it. And the thing that really just amazes me is how much the adult facilitators learn from the students as well. So at the Young Men of Color Symposium, all of the facilitators are men of color or identify as men of color. And I received numerous emails where people were like, Dwight, that space was awesome for the students and just as rejuvenating, if not more, for me in the work that I do, in the spaces that I inhabit. So that's the part that always surprises me. As a teacher, I try to remind my students that I learn way more from them than they do of me sometimes. And I think that's something that like really stood out to me with just the uniqueness and the specialness of this past Saturday.
Well, clearly there was a lot of deep work and soul searching. So I'm sure both of you are exhausted, right?
Exhausted? What's that? We got
time.
Thanksgiving break.
Who's got time?
We got things. We don't got time to be tired. We planning other things.
That is true. No time to be tired. Well, but you do have a well-deserved break coming up, and I know you're not tired. And even if you are, both of you, I see you both in action. You're both diversity in action, and you make our communities even better. So I thank you for the work.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon in Horace Mann, John.
Yes. The panel in December. Yep.
Webinar turn workshop. Have a great holiday. Thanks so much for sharing. And we look forward to next year with Young Men of Color and Redefining Power.
Yay!
All right. Bye. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.